Come closer, child. Pull that chair right up beside me. No, leave the television off. What I'm going to tell you tonight, you won't hear anywhere else. You won't find it in any newspaper, and thank God you won't find it on the internet either, because some things are better left unshared. I'm 81 years old now, and I've kept this story inside me for almost 60 years. But tonight feels like the right time. It was the autumn of 1967. I was 22 years old, living in a small university town in northern Vermont. You know the kind of place I mean. Cobblestone sidewalks, maple trees turning red and gold, the smell of wood smoke and cider in the air every October. A beautiful town, a safe town, or so I believed. I was studying literature at the college there, and I had a part-time job at the university's rare manuscripts library. 3 evenings a week, I would sit behind the reference desk, help a few professors, catalog some donations, and mostly enjoy the silence. Old libraries have a particular silence, you know. It's not like the silence of an empty room. It's heavier, like something is breathing just below the sound of breathing, like pages remembering the hands that once turned them. That October, a donation came in from the estate of a professor who had passed away the previous spring, Professor Edmund Hargrove. He had been a scholar of medieval European manuscripts, very distinguished, very well respected, the kind of man whose office smelled of pipe smoke and old leather. He had never married, he had no children. When he died in his sleep, all he left behind was his apartment, his cat, and roughly 4,000 books. Most of the books went to the general collection, but 12 of them were flagged for the rare manuscripts room. These were very old volumes, some going back to the 15th century, and they required special handling: white cotton gloves, acid-free boxes, climate-controlled shelving. I helped catalog them one by one over 3 long evenings. 11 of them were straightforward enough: a French Psalter, 2 volumes of Renaissance astronomy, a handwritten collection of German folk poetry. Remarkable things, certainly, but catalogable, understandable. But the 12th was different. It arrived separately from the others, wrapped not in archival tissue like the rest, but in a piece of oilcloth, the kind farmers use to cover machinery in the winter. The oilcloth was tied shut with a length of old twine and knotted so many times it seemed almost deliberate, almost like someone had wanted it to be difficult to open.
I shouldn't have opened it alone. That was my first mistake. The head librarian, Mrs. Patricia Wells, had specifically said the 12th item should wait until she could be present. She'd seen the note attached to it, a folded card in Professor Hargrove's own handwriting that said simply, "Do not read aloud, handle minimally. If in doubt, do not open." And Mrs. Wells, being a careful woman, had taken that seriously enough to schedule a proper review for the following Monday. But it was a Thursday evening, the library was empty, and I was 22 years old and curious in the way that only very young people can be curious, without any real sense that curiosity has a cost. I cut the twine with my desk scissors, I unfolded the oilcloth, and there it was. It was not a large book, about the size of a modern hardcover novel, perhaps a little thinner. The cover was dark, not black exactly, but the color of dried blood when it has gone very old. There was no title on the spine, no author's name. The binding was something that I later understood was not leather in any conventional sense. It had a texture that reminded me, disturbingly, of the skin on the back of a very old hand. dry, slightly warm to the touch, even through my cotton gloves. I remember noticing that warmth and thinking I was imagining it. I was not imagining it. The pages inside were made of vellum, genuine animal skin vellum, cream-colored and translucent at the edges. The text was hand-lettered in what appeared to be Latin, with occasional passages in what might have been early German or perhaps Dutch. I couldn't read it. I have some Latin, but this was written in a script so archaic, so compressed and strange, that individual letters blurred together into shapes that seemed almost like faces if you stared at them too long. Little faces, patient faces, waiting faces. There were no illustrations, no illuminated capitals, no color at all, in fact, except on one page, the very last page, where a single line of text was written in what was clearly a different hand from the rest, and in what was clearly not ink. It was brown-red and dull, and it had soaked into the vellum in a way that normal ink does not soak. I stared at that line for a long time, even though I couldn't read it, even though I didn't know what it said. And then, without understanding why, without making a conscious decision to do so, I spoke the first 3 words of it, aloud. I want you to understand what happened next, because I have spent 60 years trying to describe it to myself, and I still cannot do it justice. The library went cold. Not gradually, instantly, completely cold, the way a room goes cold when you open a window in February. My breath fogged in the air in front of me. The desk lamp flickered once, twice, then steadied into a quality of light that was somehow different than it had been. Thinner, whiter, less kind. And from somewhere in the stacks behind me, row after row of shelves stretching back 40 feet into the dark, I heard a sound. It was not a footstep. It was not a creak. It was the sound of pages turning. Dozens of pages, all at once, in a room where I was completely alone. I did not look behind me. I want to be very clear about that. I shut the book. I wrapped it back in the oilcloth as quickly as my shaking hands could manage. I tied it shut with the twine, not as carefully as it had been tied before, I am sure, but I did my best. And then I sat very still, and I listened to whatever was behind me move slowly, slowly through the darkness between the shelves, and I did not turn around, and I did not breathe, and I waited. After perhaps 5 minutes, it felt like an hour, the sound stopped, the cold lifted, the light returned to normal, and the library was just a library again. Old books, wooden shelves, the faint tick of the radiator, the perfectly ordinary smell of dust and time. I went home that night, and I did not sleep. I sat in the kitchen of my apartment, a little rented place on Elm Street, if you can believe that. Elm Street, of all the streets in the world. And I drank coffee until 3 in the morning, and I told myself it was nothing. Drafty old building, overactive imagination, the kind of thing that happens when a young man sits alone in a dark library reading strange books for too many hours. But the next morning, my roommate Daniel asked me why I had been walking the hallway all night. I told him I hadn't. He said he had heard me, heard my door open at midnight, heard slow footsteps going back and forth in the hall for hours, heard my door close again just before dawn. He had looked out once, he said, just cracked his bedroom door and looked out into the hallway. He did not describe what he saw. He just said, quietly, carefully, looking at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, he said, "I thought you were sleepwalking, but your eyes were open, wide open, and you weren't looking at anything." I didn't go back to the library that Friday. I called in sick. On Saturday, I called Mrs. Wells at home and I told her there was something wrong with the 12th item, that it should be destroyed, or locked away, or sent somewhere far away where no one would ever be tempted to open it. She listened. She was quiet for a long time after I finished speaking, and then she said, in a very measured voice, "I know. I found Hargrove's private journal last night. He wrote about this book. He found it in Leipzig in 1948 in the basement of a bombed-out building. He was the one who brought it here, and he wrote that for the last 3 years of his life, he would sometimes wake up in the morning and find the book open on his desk, open to that last page, the one with the red writing, even when he was certain, absolutely certain, he had not taken it from the shelf." She sealed the book that Monday morning, placed it in an archival box, taped the box shut, labeled it restricted, no access, and put it in the deepest part of the climate-controlled vault. She filed no catalog card. She told no one except me. I graduated the following spring. I moved away, became a high school English teacher in Connecticut, got married, had children, had grandchildren, had a perfectly ordinary, wonderfully ordinary life. I have never been back to that library. But there is one more thing I have to tell you. One more thing, and then I am done, and then we are both going to think about something else for the rest of the evening. 14 years ago, I was cleaning out a box of old papers from my teaching days, syllabi, lesson plans, report cards, and tucked between 2 folders, I found a library catalog card, old paper, faded ink, and written on it in a handwriting that was not mine, that I did not recognize, in that same compressed, archaic script I had only ever seen once before in a rare manuscripts room in Vermont in the autumn of 1967, were 3 words. The same 3 words I had spoken aloud that night. I burned the card in the kitchen sink. I turned every light on in the house. I sat with my wife until morning, and I held her hand, and I did not tell her why. From somewhere upstairs, in the room where we kept the old books we meant to donate someday, I heard pages turning, slowly, carefully, one by one, as if something had all the time in the world. Sleep well, child. Sleep well.